Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the CyberAware Podcast series with me, your host, Sherwin. Today, we're joined by our guest speaker, Joey Kleinow. In this episode, we focus on cybersecurity tools and operating system that's commonly used in the industry. For our listeners out there, would you want to introduce yourself?
I'm a Mankato State graduate almost. I'm finishing up some of my classes for my minor in the summer here. I was a computer information technology major student at Mankato State. Yeah, that's really all there is to it.
And are you currently employed?
So I'm employed at Donaldson. It's a filtration company up in the cities. Our headquarters is in Bloomington, but yeah, I work as a cybersecurity analyst there.
Oh, that's great. All right. So for our first question of the day, what are some of the common tools that are used in the industry pertaining specifically to cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much the most obvious one right away, and that would be firewalls. There's a lot of firewall configuration. So, if you stop someone from getting in the door, then you don't really have as much of a concern for the security down the line. It just kind of stops them early on.
Was it easy to learn, and this is regarding firewalls, was it easy to learn the basics and, what kind of resources did you go about having to go through?
Yeah. So before I came to Mankato State, I was actually at Southeast Technical College in Winona, and I was pursuing a networking and telecommunications degree there. So I had a lot of experience with ports, routing, with actual routers. Cisco using command line and configuring them. Yeah, so that's where I got a lot of my experience with firewalls from, was from actually pursuing a networking degree. Yeah, so that really benefited me, I think, with firewalls, and then I got that rehashed into me when I went ahead and started pursuing my degree at Mankato State and realized security also leans very heavy on firewalls and basically network security.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe there are also a few networking courses that you can take that are offered by the IT department.
Yeah, IT 360, of course, they're changing the names now, so I don't know what it is, but networking, intro to networking, with Saeed, I took it. I believe he's still the guy that teaches it. But yeah, no, that's a great course. And of course, I think one of the best ones is information warfare. That one teaches you that one's a who of a time. For anyone listening out there, go old Dr. V, he's the best.
For our listeners, Dr. V was our first guest. Yeah, definitely approach him, especially be it in classroom or if you're an IT student. Select him as your advisor. He's a great advisor and a great mentor to many alums who have graduated through MSU and are now actively, pursuing jobs in the industry.
Yeah, Sherwin's totally right. He's my advisor as well, and yeah, I had a few advisors before him. Not to tote him up too much, but I had a few advisors before him, but he has experience in the field I wanted to get into, and I think that's kind of a understated thing, is to get an advisor that, if you want to go into security, well, if you can, try and get an advisor that's was in security, because they're going to have the best tips.
All right. For our second question, what would you recommend any introductory tools, especially for a lot of the students that are starting to try and secure a cybersecurity job?
Oh yeah. I really want to advocate, before I get deep into tools, is I think having projects is one of the reasons I got my job, and I think it really puts you apart from the rest of everyone else. I think that it's really important to show that you can apply your skills, and you made your own project. Not saying a school project. I'm saying, like, oh boy, for me it was hacking Xboxes back in the day. Having some of that, showing that your curiosity kind of carried you, and you were able to complete a project under your own interests. You weren't doing it because of a grade. You were doing it because you were like, I wonder if I can run Linux on this thing. That's really, it really is good. But as far as tools go, if you're not doing a project, just tools in general, if you want a job in cybersecurity, it's very beneficial to run like Kali Linux. I like to run Pop! OS for my daily one, but Kali has tons of packed-in tools. And for any of the older listeners out there, Kali's the newer version of Backtrack back in the day. Um, so yeah, if you run Kali, man, there's social engineering's an easy one to get hooked on right away. And then you can have fun ones like Hydra, Burp Suite, all kinds of good stuff. But Kali, I think, is the best tool for people to get used to, and getting used to securing networks and networking in general for security.
Yeah, I know a couple of tools would be, Wireshark is a great one to get started. It's a great packet capturing, analyzer. And then we also, and I think there are a couple of tools that our previous guests on the show have come and talked about as well. But yeah, definitely get familiar with a Linux or distribution system for an operating system. That was a great key thing that I took for as a pursuing undergraduate in IT, trying to get into cybersec.
Yeah, I think that just knowing the syntax, knowing how to use the terminal, and how I got used to it was when I was like 13 or 14 years old. I thought Linux was the coolest thing ever. It felt new, it felt fresh, and I was just having fun using it. And back then, it was a good introductory Linux distro for people that just want to run it as their daily driver. And that's the best way to learn Linux, honestly, is dual boot to be safe, and of course be careful installing a dual boot setup, because if you're not familiar with it, you could screw up your Windows distro. So be careful, back up stuff first. But you would go ahead and install like Linux Mint back when I was like 13, 14, and you run that for your whole OS, for everything, web browsing, whatever you wanna. And then where you really learn is when you wanted to run a Windows game, and you would search the forums. And back then, it wasn't as easy, and you could go ahead and figure out, okay, I need to run this command, this .sh script to install this, because if you're if you want to play a game, and you want to play it on Linux just because it would be kind of cool, you naturally just learn things along the way. So you don't think you're learning, but you're really learning. So that's cool.
Right, right. Especially getting familiar with the different scripts, Bash and a lot of the Linux commands are essential. And for those of you that don't even know how to, get started with Linux, there are plenty of guides and resources available all across the internet. And I'm sure we can definitely provide, and if you look in the description, we will provide you with a few of those resources to help get you started. Right. So I know you mentioned Pop OS, Joey, as the distribution that you're currently running or working with. Uh, what kind of distribution would you recommend for a lot of the users that are still trying to get not necessarily cybersecurity, but still trying to get started with it? I know you mentioned
Yeah,
Kali
no,
too.
I think you're onto a good point there. When it really comes down to it, is pick the OS that it kind of it's your fancy. For the more technical users out there, they'll probably boast their chest and be like, "Ah, it's not running Arch Linux." Yes, yes, I know. I ran Arch Linux for a long time. No problem. But the drivers for my graphics card and having OpenCL installed right out of the bat is just so convenient. Like I can whip a build together like I just did a week ago of old scrap parts. I got an AMD FX 8350 pile driver CPU and like a RX 580, and I just installed Linux as the only OS on that, and there you go. I was able to have the drivers pre-installed, had a real sexy looking UI all ready to go, and yeah, no, it was really nice. Versus like say even Mint OS, you're gonna have to go to hardware drivers and install it separate. And then for the more technical users out there, I want to try something new and they like Arch, and they want the Pac-Man file manager, as it's called. That's how you install stuff. That what I'm referring to is Manjaro. Manjaro is a
Manjaro Linux. Yeah.
yeah, Manjaro Linux is great, but I've had some issues with laptops with Intel and a NVIDIA graphics card. It won't install sometimes. It has a kind of an issue with installer. So Manjaro is not as mature as Pop! OS, I find, for compatibility reasons, but they're both great. I love them.
Right. And so that brings us to our next question, Joey. I know different organizations work with different tools, and for your organization specifically, do you guys work on crafting your tools in house, or do you use third party tools? You don't need to go into any of the specifics because I know many organizations make you sign a non disclosure agreement. But what are some of the gist of tools that you guys source or develop in house?
Yeah, so we do some in-house pen testing, of course. It's good to have, no matter the company, if they have in-house or not, it's always good to have some people come from the outside in pen test organization because they might look places that we might not look. And we'll do that to make sure we get well-rounded. But yeah, I mean, unique tools wise, we do like to use some of the industry's tools that exist from other companies. Um, we might develop a tool of our own here and there, but for the most part, I think it's hard to argue with the fact that if you have an established company that makes a tool already and it works, that's usually a cheaper option than trying to maintain your own software. So yeah, a lot of the time, we'll go ahead and do that route. And then as far as making our own tools, if the technology doesn't exist yet, or if we don't have a tool in the industry that does what we want it to do, then sure, we'll make our own tool. But for the most part, from a feasible standpoint, we'll use established tools.
All right, and I think this would be our last question, and then we'll have a little time to just ask some general questions. Since you're almost done with college, what was your general college experience like? And I know you mentioned projects and stuff like that. What kind of projects or specific topics that you discussed or engaged with your professors in your courses really brought out that cybersecurity experience for you?
Yeah. For a cybersecurity experience, for me, it was the projects, the ones that are kind of frowned upon. Because the problem with cybersecurity is everyone thinks that, oh boy, this guy, he's doing something he shouldn't be. So what I'm saying is, I'd hack the Xbox. Well, I'm using it for homebrew. I'm not using it for pirating games. I'm using it for legal things. And I'm just making it so I'm not modifying existing code. I'm running my own code, replacing the old code completely. So I'm not tampering with, say, copyrighted code or anything. From a legal standpoint, don't be pirating games, kids. But a lot of people, for cybersecurity, I think it's very beneficial. What I started with was installing mod chips back in the day, on like GameCubes and PS2s, and then back in the prime days of PSP.
Yeah, especially for oh sorry, yeah, especially for the younger folks out there, those that don't know what a PSP is. It stands for the PlayStation Portable, and it was one of the most popular, handheld gaming consoles back then.
Yeah, no, PSP was awesome back in the day. It was the competitor to the Nintendo DS, which a lot of people know about. But yeah, who would have thought that that gaming system that you got in your room, like an Xbox, a PSP, that could be your gateway to cybersecurity. All you have to do is really get into, well, I want to do something it's not meant for. I want to run Linux. That was my drive. I was like, I want to run Linux homebrew on this Xbox. It's a triple core IBM Power PC chip. I'm like, okay, Macs used to run that. There's got to be a way to run a different OS on this. And back then in '05, when the Xbox 360 came out, this game console, which you could buy for less than a CPU, had more power and, it was untapped potential. And so that was really interesting because I was thinking, man, what can you accomplish with that? And I think a lot of kids out there, or people just going to college in general, that want to get a field in there, don't be afraid to open something up and figure out how it works. Watch a few YouTube tutorials on stuff. Once you successfully say mod an Xbox, you kind of get self confidence and you can go ahead and do more things. So then I was able to install homebrew, and Oh man, that let the good times roll. There's nothing better than learning and playing games. So I think that's what gets a lot of people in the IT field in general. If games are involved, it's pretty easy to go ahead and get hooked and start learning without even knowing you're learning.
Right? And games are a great platform in general to, stress test a lot of capabilities and functionalities of different systems. But no, Joey is completely right, especially for one of the things that piqued my interest when I stepped into IT is in IT, you're constantly learning new stuff. Because if you get stagnant, it's basically you can kiss your career goodbye, right? You're constantly having to relearn and reteach yourself on the fly. But and especially if you're a person that's always tinkering around with projects and you're having different avenues to like showcase your skills, you can really, in college especially, you can really make that leave a mark behind, and you can, especially in the interviews. I'm sure it is really beneficial when you showcase it and they take a look at it and they see it either in your resume or possibly even in your cover. So document all of those, that they're critical, especially for long-term success.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to some people say pursue a major in IT, again, the CIT or computer science, and they do it for the wrong reasons, and they're just going to get stagnant, like you said, because they don't have the interest in it. So they're going to lose interest. They go like, okay, I got my degree. I somehow got a job in the field that I'm not interested in. So they're going to go ahead and just, hate their job first off. And then they don't want to learn, and it keeps evolving because they're not interested in it, right? So they do it for the money, which is all the wrong reasons. So you got to make sure that if you have a real interest in it, then do it. Because otherwise, say like there's a big change around the corner, Windows 11 comes out, something crazy, right? And well, then all of a sudden you weren't interested in it, so you're just gonna start falling behind because on your free time, you don't have a desire to, figure out how things work or tinker around with the new stuff. If you just don't have a sense of curiosity in it, then I think it's all the wrong reasons to get into it. But if you have a sense of curiosity and you really honestly love tinkering on stuff or learning new stuff, man, then yeah, that's great.
Yep. And that doesn't just revolve around cybersecurity, folks. It's just you have to be passionate about what you do regardless of your field of study. Because if you don't, then you're just gonna face stagnation and job boredom, and you're gonna lose interest pretty fast. You'll be getting paid the big bucks, but at the end of the day, it's just it might seem like a waste. You love Linux a whole lot, so why do you love Linux so much?
Well, I think let's see. For the more general audience out there, one of the primary reasons I love Linux is the power of the terminal. And the power of the terminal is just unrivaled. And what I mean by that is, say you want to install something and you know a name of it, right? You know what to Google. You're like, okay, let's say you want to download Steam, and you go, okay, I want to download Steam. So what do you do on Windows? You go to Google, you Google Steam, you go to Steam's webpage, then you download it, and then once it's downloaded, then you run it and you install it, right? Well, what if I told you you could just run one command line that does all of that for you? So you're looking for Steam. Say you're running a Debian-based Linux, you would just literally type sudo elevated privilege. So it means sudo apt-get and install Steam, and there you go. And if you're not sure if it's Steam dash beta, if the whole name is Steam, you can hit Steam and then hit Tab. Hit it once and it might autocomplete. If not, hit it twice and it'll tell you how many possible options have that same name. And then you can go ahead and pick. And that you hit enter and it's going to download Steam. It is going to install Steam and it's going to get all the required packets or what should I say, dependencies. So everything else it needs to run, you'll go ahead and install it. And you literally can just type in Steam after that, hit enter, and it boots up Steam. You didn't have to navigate anywhere. You just went one place, the terminal, and you typed in one command, and it did it all for you. It's just so much faster.
Right. And that just shows you the power and capability of like command line, if you get, so another pro tip is, folks, get good at learning your command lines and stop using like a lot of the graphics based applications, and start reverting back to just command line, because the more you strengthen your capability in command line, the more quicker your approach to anything from just simple application installations to you know uh, doing whole lot of cybersec stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just one of the primary things, because that's something you'll use all the time. Is you'll always want to add new stuff, new software gets released, you'll want to install it, and I know some people out there, those more technical users, will be like, well, what if it's not in the repositories? Well, obviously, then it's a little more complicated, but it's not then. So if they don't have it somehow in the repositories, you can literally just do the same thing you do on Windows then, which is very seldom, but you could download it from their website, and usually it'll come in like a deb file. Click on it, hit install. Now it's just like Windows. But the point is, most of the time you don't need to go to Google and look up that software. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you got reduced RAM usage. People are like, Windows 10 is fairly lean compared to Windows Vista and Windows 7 was, but compared to Linux though, it's bloaty. I mean, you could run Pop OS, for example, real nice looking UI. Takes a bit more RAM because it's running GNOME. But no, you can go ahead and run that, and I'll be idling at the dashboard, running like a 4K monitor or something, and it'll be using 500 megabytes of RAM. That's it. So, and I can run way more VMs, and I don't have to worry about something doing updates in the background. It's another thing, you can have it do automatic updates. It'll tell you when there's updates, but it won't download the updates when you're trying to type a paper. And Windows, say it's a server, you don't have to restart. It'll install them when you tell them to install them, which it's so much more convenient. It's an OS centered around what you want and not what's easiest for you.
And I think one of the biggest benefits is that it's free and open source, and there's a lot of community driven learning that goes into refining it and making each patch or update even better.
Yeah, definitely. And a good example of that is Unity now supports Linux, and you can it doesn't do it directly. It's supported, but it's kind of like one of those hodgepodge support things. But you could go ahead and run Unity editor in Linux, for example, and you can do everything you can do on Windows, but it uses less RAM. It's more responsive. I actually had less freezing and crashing with the Linux one than I do on Windows, which is kind of ironic. But
all right, thanks, Joey, for the informative and interesting episode. And to our listeners out there at MSU and beyond, we do want to know your thoughts. Do send us some feedback at itsecurity@mnsu.edu, or fill out a survey at link.mnsu.edu/CyberAware feedback. And all of these links will be posted in the description.